I am Mark Shapiro, music director of Cantori, New York. And this is Ben Moore, composer and artist of many kinds, which we may get into. So Cantori, New York will be, I guess we could say, premiering a revision of your choral cycle, The Wave Rises. In this current version, it will be for clarinet, cello, and harp, and mixed chorus. And pandemic willing, we will be doing it in March 2021, as we had planned to do it. No, March 2022.
2022, yeah.
As we had planned to do it in March 2020. The years all run together. So,
yeah.
And I had been telling you, Ben, that the chorus had been sort of engaged with the piece on the internet during the pandemic, and everybody was really loving it and loving the way the text works and the way the lines work. So
that's great to hear.
With that, tell us about both the original genesis of the piece, and both in terms of how you came to this text, who it was written for and all that, and then the revision.
Sure thing. So this was a commission from Clara Longstreth and her group, the New Amsterdam Singers. They had the 50th anniversary back in 2018, and she was doing some commissioning. I think she had 3 commissions for that season. And I was on the spring concert in May of that year, 2018. And Clara had given me free rein, really. I mean, she was going to sign off on what I chose. And it's always a long struggle for me to find texts that inspire me. There's so many factors involved. I have to feel emotionally excited about the text, number one. That's pretty obvious. But it also has to be material that can be adapted, that just lends itself to being sung, obviously. And so many of my favorite poets, I just can't set because of some quality. Like Walt Whitman, I cannot set his poetry. I love his poetry, but the lines are too long, the words are too long. And for me personally, I just can't set it. And other poets like Wallace Stevens are far too dense, and you have to ponder his poems. I love it, but I think an audience needs to absorb what they hear in real time.
Sure.
So I kind of despaired, and I also I try to stay away from translations because I don't know if I'm getting the real deal.
Yeah.
And it depends so much on the translator. And so I shied away from, I kind of struck out with poetry. So I thought I'll turn to prose. And I thought of Virginia Woolf. I found out right away that most of her work, at least in 2018, was not even available with the copyright laws in England. But with some negotiating with her estate, I was able to get permission.
Wow.
For the excerpts that I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
I've always loved Virginia Woolf. Funnily enough, I wasn't really exposed to her material through reading her books. My first real exposure was hearing Eileen Atkins do a play. Sure. of her essay, A Room of One's Own. Are you familiar with that, Mark?
Yep.
Yeah, that's what really, yeah. Were you impressed by that as well?
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, I was so bowled over by the beauty of it and the really progressive ideas. This thing was written in the 1920s, but it was so feminist and so far-reaching and so many provocative ideas in it. So I started to look at Virginia Woolf, and it was just as simple as Googling around online, mm-hmm. and you see come up with all these famous quotes from her writing. And I found that in those quotes, there were incredibly insightful prose passages and also incredibly poetic. And so I have done prose settings before. I set some of the excerpts from, this was a translation of Van Gogh's letters. Mm-hmm. So I was, I guess you could say, adept at finding ways to use prose passages in music. And I didn't even realize that Virginia Woolf, her work just spans so many genres and so many profound ideas. She's like Shakespeare to me. She doesn't shy away from the deepest, darkest corners of our psyches. And so I divided the piece into 3 categories: on life, on beauty and on death, and picked 6 passages from her writings, organized them that way.
And are these writings, are they letters, diaries, essays?
Yeah, they're from very disparate sources. So you have, let's see if I got this right. The first, On Life, is from a diary entry. The second one is another diary entry. The third one is from a nonfiction collection called Monday or Tuesday. Then I have a book that she wrote from her diaries called A Writer's Diary. On Beauty is from A Room of One's Own. And on Death, my last big chunk, is the last paragraph of her novel, The Waves.
Right.
Yes.
Is that where the title comes from?
The Wave Rises comes from that last chunk, from the waves. But she uses the metaphor of the waves in one of the other sections, and to me, it's suggested throughout.
Yeah.
This spiritual idea of us not being solid, not being contained within ourselves, but a wave of spirit and motion that's passing through this medium of whatever it is we're in here. Yeah.
Do you think, I've been wondering this, do you think the metaphor of the wave, as she understood it and as you do, has anything to do with renewability?
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because, you know, in this final section, she says, and in me too the wave rises, and she identifies the enemy as being death itself. Right. And she identifies with, well, in the novel, it's her friend Percival, who was killed in India. I don't know if you've read The Waves, but
I have, although it's been a while. Yeah.
But there's this, you know, these 6 friends, and one of those 6, or he's the 7th, I think, we hardly hear from in the novel, but he's extolled by all his friends as being heroic and brave and good and honest and everything everyone wants to be. But he's killed randomly on a horse in India, and he becomes symbolic of what all their lives could and should be. And so there is this strain of hope, even though she's railing against death and she's thinking of herself as being transitory. To me, there is this exalted sense of, this part of me will die, but I'm moving on to another level, another realm. And as we know, of course, Virginia Woolf was plagued with mental illness, and she ended her own life. Yeah. Which seems in some ways to fly in the face of so much of her writing. On the one hand, on the other hand, it's embracing of what she felt she had to do. There's some paradox there for me.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And do you think that paradox was in your heart as you were writing the piece?
Well, when I read these passages, it just struck me, this is something I understand. You know, this is something I can really write music for, because I feel so passionately about it. To be honest, the Waves passages, you know, where identifying death as the enemy, my first instinct was, this is over the top. But then when I went back and read most of the book and knew what she was doing, she was mimicking an epic drama, a heroic drama. Percival figures in Parsifal, and he's one of the knights who fought for the Holy Grail. It's very symbolic, very epic, and I think she's talking about that id within us that is fighting against all odds all the time. That I can relate to.
Yeah, that's actually what I was about to ask you. Is her thought about death almost that death itself is a metaphor for something else?
I know, and I've been trying to guess at what she's after there. I think in the heroic, epic quality of that text, she's got to be after something more. I mean, she's referring to something that's epic, and like Parsifal, it's something bigger than all of us. And I think that's in there.
Would you say that it's something about that she and you are thinking about tapping into a sort of life force that dwells in us, but that it may or may not be ours. And that for her, death would be the extinction of that force, whether or not we literally die.
You're saying for her, it would be or wouldn't be the extinction?
My thought is maybe for her, it would be. That what she means by death is not necessarily whether we literally live or die.
Right, yeah.
But the honoring of that force and the failure to live that force would be death.
Exactly. And she identifies with the wave, which is by definition fleeting and unmoored and with boundaryless. And the last line of her book is the waves broke on the shore. That is the annihilation of the wave, of course. But that force that caused the wave is ongoing, and there are more waves and more waves. And in an earlier passage that I chose, she talks about this self, which is behind ourselves, and that's kind of speaking to the other elements of ourselves. And then in another, she identifies a light that she's breaking through to see the light, but then she asks, what is the light? So she's always trying to look beyond the next layer. Where is ultimate reality? And certainly the implication there is it's certainly not with my paltry life here, mortal life on the planet.
Or any of us, right? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's big stuff. It's very powerful.
It is. And I'm so glad, it's so interesting to be talking to you as well as the other composers. There are a few themes that seem to tie a lot of these things together.
Oh yeah.
And one of them, what we're just talking about is certainly one of them. And also the idea of setting prose, because I hadn't sort of consciously realized that the whole concert is prose.
Oh, is it really? Interesting.
Yeah. And everybody, I've been asking everybody, so how do you do that? So you mentioned a little bit, without spilling the beans about what other composers have said, you said you had sort of worked something out about prose. Can you speak to that any more?
Yeah, almost all music that I really like, at least, has repetition and some kind of strophic quality to it built in. And so for me to create music out of prose, there has to be I have to repeat phrases quite a bit. And that's easy enough to do.
Handel did it too, right? So yeah.
What's that? I certainly do.
Yeah, no, I said Handel did it too.
Yes, absolutely.
You're in good.
But another way is to take not just repetition textually, but you can create a melody out of a beautiful phrase, a textual phrase, and then you can begin the next phrase just instrumentally with the melody or with a repetition, and then you can have obbligato. Every composer loves obbligato because you get both. You can have some kind of counterpoint to it, and you constantly simulate a regular structure, like an ABA or ABC, ABC or AB, even if it's not really conscious to the audience or apparent to the audience. There are lots of tricks to pull that off. Just repeating the melody and then varying it. You can actually be true to the text. Every once in a while, I've pulled some little tricks, where I've left out a word or added a word, and I feel that I'm justified in doing that insofar as I'm not changing the meaning of what Virginia Woolf said.
Yeah.
And just the fact of adding music to a text changes the meaning, of course. So one has to understand that this is my interpretation of these texts. This is not, you're not going to go to this cycle or this cantata to really analyze what Virginia Woolf wrote. This is Ben Moore's intersection with Virginia Woolf.
That's so interesting. And just again, for context, I guess if I had spoken to you before Paul Crabtree, but I just spoke with Paul Crabtree, who said essentially verbatim what you just said.
Oh, really?
Yeah, interesting. His poet his writer is Iris Murdoch.
Oh, yes.
He said for him, a lot of the process of composing is really grappling with what he thinks the text means.
Yeah.
And understanding that that's what he thinks it means, but somebody else might think it means something else. But for him to really zero in on what he thinks it means and to communicate that.
And I would go even a step further, that it's also my convictions imposed on hers, using her as a conduit at times, without betraying her in any way, but adding my ideas to her ideas as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we mentioned earlier on that this is a revision of a piece that existed. Yes. Talk to us about the revision. How has it changed?
Yes. Well, it certainly has. And I thank you so much for your input from the beginning of this revision. First and foremost, suggesting the instrumentation. I knew from the premiere with New Amsterdam Singers that I wanted to add instruments other than the piano. It was originally conceived to be a cappella, but the complexity of the piece really demands instrumentation. And then kind of by necessity, I added piano as I went along, but in the back of my mind was thinking it would much benefit from some ensemble of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have the cello to create the plaintive, connective lines that can respond in dialogue with the voices, and the clarinet does that as well, but can also do some ornamentation, which adds a great deal. And the harp was something that you suggested to me that not ever crossed my mind. Mm-hmm. And I'm still anxious and excited to hear how the harp works with the chorus.
That's a great instrument, so yeah.
Yeah, it is a very complicated and diverse instrument. I knew immediately that it would really augment the tender, delicate, ethereal aspects of the work. But I'm hoping when I finally hear it, to see how it augments even the more dark and more grounded sections.
It can do so much. And the other composer of the three of you that I spoke to this morning, Rob Maggio, whose piece is for only harp and chorus, shared with me that he workshopped the part with the harpist much more than he ever did with the chorus.
Oh, no kidding. That says a lot, right?
Yeah, that he really wanted the harp part to be right, and understood what a challenge that can be to write for that instrument.
So beyond the instruments, of course, working with you, and it's always been the case with me, the more time I spend with any piece that I've written, I mean, something that I thought I'd put to bed years ago, say there's a new production of one of my theatrical works. Of course, you hear different people singing it. You spend more time with it than you did even writing it. And then things occur, and in collaboration with you, and in other cases with a director or the singers, there's a collaboration that happens. And sometimes even the mistakes that people make are really informative.
Yeah, sure.
About what I could do to improve the piece, always improving. My only regret in the music business is that you have to publish, and it's very frustrating because I don't like the idea of publishing. I want to go back in. And of course, I have revised even published works. But because we spent so much time with it, I think all the dialoguing of the different parts has really enhanced it, which I didn't have that much. Counterpoint and just echoing phrases is going to be great to hear.
We found a lot of space in the piece that was latent, and that we were able to open up so that there could be this kind of movement within that space.
Yeah, it's more fluid, for sure.
And
spacious,
really so interesting, such an interesting process. So is there anything else we should know? I think everybody should know about you. I see one of your paintings hanging behind you.
That's right.
And you're quite the polymath there. So I'm sure you get the question all the time, and I think I know the answer, but I'm sure others may not. To what extent painting affects your musical work and vice versa?
Yeah, and the truth is that I'm not one who experiences synesthesia. I don't hear sounds with colors and shapes, but I always say, and it's true, that the process of creating a visual work and the process of creating a piece of music has so many similarities. Just the brick walls you run up against, and the problem solving, and always having to step back and look at the whole, and then going back into the details, and then being overwhelmed with a piece or a work of art. Your eyes get tired, your ears get tired, stepping back, reworking later, having revelations weeks and weeks into the process, and knowing that there's no substitute for hard work. You taught this in first grade, but it's true. I mean,
Yeah.
that's where inspiration comes from. It's from the hard work. If you don't do the hard work, there's going to be no lightning bolts.
Well, I know you worked hard, and we worked hard on this.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was thinking one metaphor that we did use in our own conversations was the sort of the speck of color, or the telling detail that kind of lights up the canvas.
That's true. Sometimes a very minor change can really enlighten a whole,
and
whole passage or a whole painting. It's true.
So that was wonderful to find, yeah.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I mean, it almost seems cliche to talk about these things, but they bear repeating because I think it's a universal truth for all artists of different kinds.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think we have to leave it there for today. Pandemic willing, we will do this piece in March.
Yes, I'll say a prayer to the pandemic.
Let's all do that. And my best wishes to you and yours for we're doing this in December, so for the holidays to come. And,
yes, same to you.
Yeah, stay tuned. And we look forward to seeing you in person in March.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Mark.